Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're doing something just a little different. We're in the grand study today. We have several guests with us that of course you will not be seeing because they're camera shy. And thank all of y'all for joining us on our last videos of Marcus Aurelius' meditations and of course our ongoing exploration of the Bible. If you have not seen those, please go back and view them. Well, if you have an interest in expanding your learning on such religious things and Stoicism, you would quite likely enjoy it. Today, our topic, I don't know if it has a name really. It is something that I have been struggling with lately because one of my jobs is, or one of my activities is a landlord in lower income housing. And it's something that I have been thinking about for a number of years, and I see certain people, whether they're low income, middle class, or high class, they all seem to have the same problem. It's just a different nuance to the same problem. And the problem is foreign ideas. Like if you have an idea, well, first of all, low-income people that I encounter are not introduced to any ideas that are meaningful other than survival. Like you have survival, you learn how to manipulate and go through the process of getting something from either the government or charities. They're very adept at that. They understand how to do it very well. And outside of just a few things and the introduction of most of them to Christianity ideas and their church and a gangster sort of mentality in the low income areas, it's really difficult to introduce something different to them because most of them don't know how to read well. They don't know how to retain any information. If they could find a book to read, because they can barely write their names. Because I've signed thousands of lease agreements and they have a difficult time just scribbling their name. So if you have a difficult time scribbling your name, how can you be introduced to different methods and different ways of lifting yourself up? Because the only idea that they have, whether you're white, Hispanic, black, whatever you are, in those extreme low income situations where you don't know what a different idea is, you don't know what Eastern philosophy is, you don't know the evils of government, you don't know anything really, and you don't have any real means to understanding why you don't understand. You just have a manly, well, if you're a man, you have a manly sort of anger, like you know something's wrong. But you don't know what it is because you can't pinpoint it because you haven't had the ideas and the mental exploration to even be able to figure it out. Like you and I are pretty intelligent guys, I would like to say. And if you do that, and like if you do educate yourself and you are open to a whole myriad of ideas, and we're still attempting every day to figure out what life is. How do we interact with people? How do we grow as men? How do we, with all of our knowledge, all of these vast ideas and philosophical views, and all of our world travels, we're still trying to grow and become better. When these people can't wrap their mind around the unexamined life is not worth living by Socrates, they don't even know who Socrates is. They never, those things are just foreign. That's where I wanted to start.
All right, so you want to start on that. That's a very wide range. I would like to say first that I don't think knowing how to read or write is necessarily a standard of education, because we forget in our modern era that pencils, paper, and pens are very much within everybody's price means. But before then, there was a lot of times through the course of history, like in the days of Napoleon, a piece of paper was around 10 US dollars for him to write letters. It was very expensive. And when you go back to ancient cultures and texts, a lot of the ideas, just say you said Socrates, for instance, a lot of his ideas, he never wrote anything down. His students wrote for him. So, would you say Socrates was not very smart? No, he's very intelligent, but he didn't write anything down. Was that because he didn't think what he had was worth writing down? Was it because he just didn't put the effort into it? Did he put somebody else to do it? Or was he just a figment of Aristotle's imagination? And it was just a play for him to write. So I don't necessarily think that the ability to write or read is a standard of education, because you can be very cunning. And I've come across some of these people that on a subject that they are familiar with, they have a lot to offer on the subject. Now, is that subject something that everyone wants to explore and spend their time doing? That is not necessarily the case, but you can go to New York City or any of these big cities and you see guys out on the street hustling their wares, and for instance, New York City, you see people selling CDs. There's a lot of big rappers that came out that way. Like the 50 Cent, he came out to make tons of money, and by the counts of other people telling his life story, he did not really get educated until he was already fairly wealthy, but he had the drive to get somewhere. I think what you first have to have is the drive, because people can teach themselves how to read. Just look back at, I'm drawing a blank, the famous slave that taught himself to read, Franklin Douglass. He taught himself basics of how to read, and he would go, Frederick Douglass, sorry. So he was going to the little white kids in the neighborhood and helping them to find out these letters, and he taught himself how to read, but he had the drive to do it. So what we get into on some of these lower incomes is what is feasible for them. Do they just have the drive to survive? Are they just trying to look for their next meal? Are they wanting to put in the money, time, and resources to grow their education when it might not be that profitable? I mean, we live in an age now that it is almost more profitable not to work than it is to work. There's help wanted signs everywhere. So we have to take all that into consideration before we can make any of these snap judgments. Now, I'm not saying you do, but a lot of times people do make snap judgments. Oh, he can't read. Maybe he's dyslexic and he doesn't read very well. There's a lot of people through history that did not read very well. Benjamin Franklin was not the strongest reader until he sat down and put lots and lots of time and effort into reading.
Until he became great at it.
Yeah, and then he became great at it. So I think what I've said in some of our previous videos of time allocation, I think first we need to figure out where our time is going, and then you have a better chance of fixing some of the problems. But then you also have to have that curious nature, and where do people get some of this curious nature from? Like us, a lot of it was we just found something and we wanted to explore it, so we spent the time and energy and effort to explore it. So some of these ideas that I think people could want to know or do want to know, they haven't even been introduced to anything because they live in such a small community that they really don't go out. Like you said, Hispanic speaking people, there's people that have been in these states for decades and they don't speak any English because they live in their little community, no matter if it's a big city or a small town, and they just don't explore outside their community, so they really don't have a need to learn English. And there's a lot of expats that do the same thing in Thailand or other places, that they don't go out and explore the local community because they live in their tight area. So first, I think there has to be someone that's broken out of that mold that wants to explore and help others to explore those things. I think Malcolm X is a really good example.
One of the best.
Yeah, I mean, Malcolm X, he was from a low income. He was a crook and a thief until he decided in prison that he was going to change his life. And he had a mentor in jail that helped him get through those things and introduced new ideas to him. And he took those ideas and he ran with them, but he was also opened to being open.
Well, we're not going to make a rant on Malcolm X, but Malcolm X is, just briefly, is one of my personal heroes. To go from absolutely nothing and just spending his entire life very likely in jail, to come out and then to see the atrocity of not only the government standards, but the societal norms at the time, especially within his own race and the white race, in a large part oppressing the black race, and the black race oppressing their own self. And it was really interesting to watch him develop into a man, and his very, it's not dissimilar from anyone that's really trying to learn and grow as a person, to find out the truth all around them, what things are affecting them, what forces are coming into them that are going to determine their thought process or their perceptions. And then as he moves along, he goes to Mecca and finds out that, hey, all white people aren't bad. And then goes against Islam, but still was Islamic, the leaders of Islam. You know what I mean? If any of y'all don't know Malcolm X, then, or have some preconceived notion of who the man was, you need to explore it, because his life is fascinating. But to go back, I'm glad you answered or spoke on those topics the way you did, because that is kind of what I was hoping, because this was just an impromptu. I just threw this at you. We didn't go over this previously. When I was in high school, from grade school on, all of my teachers told me that I was always going to be a poor reader and never write a sentence. Practically, like, you're just okay. You're going to be below average, probably. Go on, Kevin. You're just such a nice, cute kid. Just go on. You do good with your C minuses and move along. And now, personally, I don't know anyone that is more well-read than I am. I don't know them personally. I know them through other books that I've read, and I know them through lectures that I've either attended or watched, and I can't ever get enough of those. So we're placing judgment on these people, and I don't know if it's judgment, but it's judgment. We're placing judgment on these people like I was as a kid. We're placing judgment as a society, making a societal force that onto these lower income places, no matter what the race or creed, and the force that I think is negative, and it's kind of the whole topic of the discussion, is there's a pervasive energy that I fear that is spreading around the world, particularly in the Western civilizations, that one of a false acceptance. Like, for instance, in France, let's let all the poor refugee Muslims come in because we're good people. Let's give handouts to all the poor local black kids because that's what they need. Every Western civilized, quote, civilized, blah, blah, I can't even say it.
Society, civilization, people that come together as a group.
The issue has been so distorted through the past several hundred years as these governments have grown so exponentially large and powerful, and have created these divides within the minds of people. And it's the old adage, you divide and conquer. And that is done on purpose. We divide people. We force them to not like them. We we divide them, but you better let them come over here. You better give them a handout. And then some people get upset because it's their money that they work for that they got to pay for that. Uh, it becomes a problem. They know it's a problem. They perpetuate the problem. And then you create these divides that allow governments to maintain their authoritarian figures in the hearts and minds of a little more than half of all the population, which takes away from all of our neighbors coming together and growing together. Like you said, when people could not read and write because it was too expensive, if you wanted a book, you had to be wealthy.
Very wealthy. And there wasn't a library system.
And now everyone has a phone. Everyone has all the information in the entire world at their fingertips, yet we are at the highest point of ignorance I think the world has ever seen.
I think a lot of that is because...
But hold on, let me finish this point. The point is small communities, neighbors actually knowing neighbors, people taking care of themselves, their families, and everyone immediately around them. We don't automatically assume that, oh, we have Big Brother, college, state, university. There's this overwhelming arch force over us that's going to make sure everything is okay. Well, it is nobody else's responsibility. It's a false paradigm. We are responsible for ourselves and our communities, and what we're doing with this globalization is stealing humanity away from the individual and from allowing ourselves to learn and grow from each other. Because if you don't like me, you don't have to be around me. If you don't like the way this school does something, you don't have to participate in that school. If you don't like the way X is going, if you don't like Texas, you can move to Louisiana. If you don't like Louisiana, go there. But everything is becoming so uniform, so plain Jane. No distinction of its own, no personality of its own. And the communities are so large, no one knows anybody. And if you do know somebody, it's because you met them from Facebook, Tinder, or whatever crap. You didn't meet them, or in some instances I think that's okay because you can filter out different personalities the best maybe you can. But knowing each other. You know, my neighbor's down here at the end of the road. The driveway's long. It's almost a mile long. I have no neighbors. My closest neighbor is a mile. Well, I know them. One of them I like, one of them I don't like. But imagine if we did not have a police force. Imagine if we didn't have a state. Imagine if we didn't have a federal government. Imagine if we were able to we were forced to rely on each other. I guarantee you that guy down the road that's an ass would not be an ass because he's the only ass. Everybody else is really friendly. He'd be more inclined not to be an ass because then he would actually need his neighbors and not rely on the government. That was the whole point of the discussion. Please add your input.
You know, when you talk about adding to the input on the government, I think, and I don't think it's a conspiracy to y'all, that there are certain people that run things and they have an interest in keeping people where they're at with small differences. There has to be people that serve, there has to be people that work, there has to be people that don't work, there has to be handouts, there has to be a big system to keep everybody upset with everybody else. We have to destroy communities, just like the CIA did when they went into Harlem with crack cocaine. They had to destroy those communities. I mean, it's a well-told story all throughout the course of history if you just pay attention. The people that are in the governments or in the powers that be, they have a set of goals, and they have to accomplish those goals by whatever means necessary. And the easiest way is to destroy the human connection. Right now we walk around with these cell phones that have all the information in the world, but nobody learns anything. One problem is it's too easy. It's just too easy. If somebody wants to know the answer to something, they ask Google and they forget about it. Well, before cell phones, you had to go over and to your local library and find an encyclopedia or a dictionary or whatever it might be, and you have to go sit in the stacks and study on what you want to know. Google wasn't there to provide you the answer. I mean, steep hills build muscle. If you want to get better arms, you got to go do bicep exercises. You can't lift up your phone and figure it out. Anything that means anything in life, you have to pay for with time, money, sweat, or blood. Those are the lessons that you learn the best. Money, blood, sweat. And your time is the only asset that you can never get any more of. So depending on how you spend your time determines where you're going to go as a person. And if you use that phone to play different games on and not to actually get any information, and you are setting yourself a part of society, you know, Facebook or Twitter, all these things could be a really good thing if they promoted society. But what they generally end up doing is separating people into this group and that group, and this group fights with that group, and this group fights with that group. And there's no real sense of community. They're not bringing people together. They're doing a better job of separating people and keeping people away from the human connection.
You are exactly right, sir. And what I like is, you know, the all the times that we've been in Italy and traveling the world, it always reminds me and brings me back to the city-state. That is just such a wonderful dream that really should happen. How wonderful would the world be if there were no states, there were no countries. There might be these communities. There's the communities of people. There's the community of Marshall over there. There's the city of and state of Shreveport, or you know, those things could actually happen today.
Well, I don't know if it could happen today, because I mean, once you get into the
everything is forced.
Well, they use global infrastructure as a problem to that. You know, we can't have this road going to this community, and we can't have this airline flying to this one unless they comply with this, and
this. Again, it's another divide. Everything is a division. Everything is a false boundary. It's just ridiculous. Would racial tensions ever have been so high as they were after, or even before the Civil War, if government was never involved? I would have to say no. I would have to say racial tensions that were occurring in the 40s and 30s, 40s, and 50s and 60s, when, I don't know, kind of got better in the, late 60s. But anyway, they were all bad throughout all those time periods. If the government was not involved and the people actually just didn't tolerate the massive police brutality, it just never would have happened.
That is a good point that you bring up, because a lot of the problems were police brutality, and the police brutality were funded by the states and the governments. So it wasn't necessarily the people having a problem with something. It was, again, the powers that be.
Of course, you did have the individuals that were causing problems. I mean, you always have racists, no matter who they are. I mean, you have black racists, white racists, Mexican racists. I mean, they're all racist. Everybody has their own little slice of racism, but who cares? On the whole, most people just don't care. Like if you just don't care. Like you and I have traveled the world, and we have stood out in many places. We're the only white person. You know, we're in the Middle East, and we were a little apprehensive about being there, because you know, in these states you hear about, oh, everybody's going to kill you, and when you're there, there's going to be bad. Y'all be so careful. Everybody's, oh, please be so careful. Everybody was extremely friendly.
But that's because we were friendly to them.
But we're the only two there. We didn't have a choice but to. It goes to it goes to our topic that we're talking about. We were in a small society where we were in the Middle East. That one was a large city, but we're in that area, and they were peaceful. They were clean. They were respectful. We were clean and respectful too, but we were way different. I mean, we were the only tall white men anywhere around, and they were just as nice as they could be to us. That goes to the whole point of a city-state, because Doha and Qatar, I mean, it's basically a city-state. It's the only one really that exists. That's kind of the same principle that I think that the world should aspire to. Because if neighbor has to look after neighbor, the world becomes an infinitely better place. I mean, you can look throughout history. You have all these little tribes warring, and we have this false notion because the United States government is the victor over Indians that were here. They had a vastly better system than.
You know, it's interesting when you say these tribes warring against one another. If you really look back to the broader scope of history and people that have spent time with these indigenous cultures or the ancient cultures, there wasn't so much warring as just small battles between them. It was actually pretty rare that there was a full-on war. They would come together in a lot of cases and just have games like a gladiatorial event, or they would have basically their set of tributes. But you know, there would be some raiding of some civilizations, but on the vast scope of it, even the rivals, they still had to trade with those people because, you know, if you're a Native American culture and you're living out on the plains, that tribe that you might not like, you still have to deal with them on occasion. So you're not going to go wipe them out entirely. That was the people that came over from Europe that wanted to have genocide.
Yeah, we had to wipe them out because they were different
Yes.
from our forefathers. The whole point is city-states, small communities work. They've always worked. We've distorted that history because Western governments and civilizations don't want us even talking about. I mean, there's just countless books about the Native Americans and their culture and how fascinating it is, and their spirituality that they've really just stole from this whole country. And I think it's sad, and I hope that we go back to well, eventually we will, because everything crumbles, just as Spain crumbled, France crumbled, Britain crumbled. The United States will crumble too. That probably offends some of y'all who thinks, you know, we're going to last forever. No civilization lasts forever. No man lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever. And the sooner it crumbles, the better. So let's get on with it.
Yeah, propping it up and adding Band-Aids is generally a bad idea.
Adding Band-Aids to a cut throat still leads to you bleeding to death. All right, Mr. Schmidt, sign us out.
All right, I hope you enjoyed having our little conversation and the study with us. Thought it'd be a nice change of scenery for y'all, and I thank everyone in attendance for your participation, even though you don't participate very much, and have a good day.